Oh, good.
Oh, can I introduce you? Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm gonna introduce myself somewhere in this.
Okay, but can I just say, so Linda is
Of
an
course.
awesome woman in tech, in the international environment, traveling around the world, having sessions on all technical topics. She's a Fabric and Power BI guru. But she also does some like mental health talks and women in technology talks, and this is one of the talks that I've heard great stuff about, so I really wanted that one to be here. So overall, Linda's just an awesome woman in tech and Microsoft MVP, so she's cool. Yes,
Well, thank you. That was an epic introduction.
I had to give it, right? And now you can do your thing.
Sometimes when I get these introductions, I just wish my kids could hear this. Because I still have no idea what I'm doing. Just work all the time. So, okay, let's roll. Yeah, as Marthe said, I do a lot of mental health kind of things, and this is one of them. This is also one of them that I myself need repetition of every once in a while because I struggle with this, as many other people do. But there are things that we can actually do to fix what we do wrong. And that is something we're going to discuss during this whole session. I don't know about the specific WIT lunch that you have now, but probably you don't all know each other. And networking events just like this one that you're actually at now is a great example of multitasking. You might be at a venue or restaurant that is new to you, and while trying to find a place to like hang your coat, you might be looking around to see faces that you recognize. At the same time that there is a lot of faces that you don't recognize, and you smile and maybe introduce yourself. And you try to remember those new people's name and maybe some of them that you already know. And there you try to remember the people that you did know, what kind of area were they working in, and so forth. Then you perhaps want to grab a drink or a snack or find the toilet. All of this is probably even before you even sit down to listen to a topic where you're supposed to stay focused. That is a lot of impressions and new experiences for one evening event. It can be a bit daunting and overwhelming, perhaps. And this is a form of multitasking. We try to navigate all of these new things and faces with a smile on our face and at the same time learning some content. There is no wonder that we feel kind of tired after things like this. But it is lucky that we probably doesn't do this too often. But what if this kind of experience happened on a daily basis? Not in the form of networking events, but other things. What if that level of drainage happens every day for a week, a month, a year? How do you think we would react to that? My guess is pretty poorly. Even if the most part of our work is not going to networking events, it can still be very overwhelming and chaotic at the same time. From other sorts of energy consuming events that we do on a day-to-day basis. We still have a lot of things going on at the same time. There might be some project planning meetings, then onto some coding, then maybe a call with a new client or a stakeholder. You might even do some coding during one of those meetings because they often seem to drag on for quite some time. Whatever it may be that you're doing might become overwhelming after a while if you have no control over it. Some people like to work in a bit of a chaos, and that might be okay for a while, but suddenly everything spirals out of hand and you can't keep up. If we instead spend some time to plan and schedule things, we won't have to clean up our messes. But that time up in front is often skipped by many. I will try to guide you on how you could start taking small steps to a more organized way of work, and I can almost guarantee you that it will drop your shoulders a few inches. So my name is Linda Torrång, and I work as a data platform engineer for Data Masterminds. And I've been working in tech for about 5 years now. And prior to that, I was working in retail and in journalism. A big reason for getting into journalism was my constant curiosity to learn new things, which definitely comes in handy in this field as well. And now I love to bring business and technology closer together. I also host the Swedish Power BI and Fabric user group with my friend and colleague Alexander Albertsson. And as a few months ago, I'm also a Microsoft MVP, which is so much fun. And not to forget, I am a multitasking addict. As I said, I've presented these sessions a few times now, and every time is a constant reminder for myself that I still don't listen to my own advice. And it's so easy to fall back into bad habits. So this topic clearly needs repetition from time to time for all of us. It really escalated for me personally when I had my kids, and that was about 10 years ago. So I tried to do everything at once. I tried to be the good mom, do a good job, be a good partner and good friend. I wanted it all and I wanted to achieve it without hindrances. And I still want that, all of it. But I have realized that it will not come naturally to me without some planning. Planning to me has often been seen as something that is boring because I am a very impulsive person. And I like it like that. But I also did realize that being impulsive and trying to get this life puzzle together wasn't a great combination. Instead, what I often ended up with was a big mess. Prioritizing under pressure is not a talent that many of us have, and it took me a while to figure out where I went wrong. And as I explained again and again, I still fail, even though in the back of my mind, I know what's necessary to make things more organized. I had to stop thinking that I was the exception, someone who could do it all and have impulsive lifestyle at the same time. I wasn't. And I'm sad to say that neither are you. And that's okay. So this is a fun one. A few years ago, I found myself in a situation where I was constantly juggling multiple tasks at work. I thought that I was being efficient, but it soon came clear that I wasn't. For example, I had a project that was coming to a close. We were going to production the following week. We had some final fixes, but also a lot of meetings with stakeholders. During one of those meetings, I tried to get some stuff done at the same time. I was working in SQL at the time, and I wrote an update statement. It was a small fix to get everything fixed before we go live. The update was meant for one specific row, and I wrote that script exactly as it was meant while the other people in the meeting were talking. So far, so good. Then someone asked me a question, and I switched over in my brain to answer that. Getting back after the question was answered, I marked the code and I ran it without the where clause, which was simply forgotten about in my head at the time. My task switching brain couldn't keep up, and I updated all of the rows in the table. It set the entire project back, and I had to scramble to fix it. That was neither efficient or productive, which was my intention to begin with. You might not have done anything equally bad, but probably there is something in your mind when things didn't really work out as you expected. That experience made me realize that I was not getting more done. I was just getting a lot of things done poorly. And I started to researching how multitasking affects our brain and productivity. And I learned a few key things that changed the way I worked. So to have us all tonight go from squirrels who's running around trying to do everything to a calm koala in control of our time and manage our distractions, because it is possible. And to be honest, it doesn't even need to be as bad as running around doing everything at once. It could be that you just feel that your calendar owns you rather than you controlling your calendar. We can make changes to make our work feel less overwhelming and get back to the feeling of being in control. So let's have a look at how the agenda for this will look. We will start by defining multitasking and some common misconceptions and the consequences that it can lead to. How to find what triggers us and how to solve it depending on those different triggers. And hopefully end up in a bit more controlled working environment. So, multitasking can be many things. It is not only connected to work. Multitasking is whenever you perform more than one task simultaneously. In theory, it sounds efficient. Doing multiple things at once should lead to more things getting done, right? However, what we often think of as multitasking is actually task switching, the rapid shifting of focus from one task to another. Every time you switch task, your brain takes time to refocus again, which can waste valuable time. We are getting more and more programmed that being busy is something positive and admirable, to have every weekend fully planned or never taking time off because we are so busy. That is not a helpful culture for us who wants to do less. Depending on what we are occupying ourselves with, we'll have different cognitive loads in our mental awareness. We are reasonably capable of walking and talking, because the legs move pretty autonomous, so we can keep having a deep discussion at the same time. But as soon as we struggle to find our way, we have to struggle more to keep that discussion going. And it's not for nothing the joke about when you drive your car, you turn down the volume when you get closer to your destination, where you try to find that parking spot or the right address, because we really can't do that both things at the same time. So there are different kinds of multitasking. Some things we can combine, but some gets more complex, and we have limited resources of cognitive capabilities. We might be able to write those emails and listening to music, but not listening to a podcast. Our brains are not designed to focus on more than one complex task at a time. Instead, constant task switching drains your mental energy, leading to fatigue and reduced performance. So, if you're honest with yourself, do you in general think that you are good at multitasking? Something is happening in your brain right now and you think like, yeah, I'm pretty good. I've got it covered. It's working for me. Nice. Live with that for a while. It might change. But some common misconceptions. I'm good at multitasking because I do it all the time. Frequent multitasking can give you the illusion of skills, but it often leads to superficial engagement with tasks, meaning nothing gets the full attention that it deserves. And to be constantly in multitasking mode might feel productive, says you're doing so many things at the same time, but it often results in more mistakes and lower quality of work and more stress. The next misconception is multitasking is the only way to handle a heavy workload. Well, my friend, no, that is not the answer to a heavy workload. Multitasking creates a false sense of urgency and can increase the stress levels, making it even harder to manage even normal workload efficiently. Instead of juggling tasks, prioritize and focus on one task at a time. It will lead to better outcomes. This approach instead leads to reduced stress and allows for higher quality of work. If it's not possible to do one thing at a time in the time frame that you have, then you might need to accept that one thing or several things might not be done. And choosing those things that won't be done is probably better than doing them all with a less great result. It's when we start seeing what we can fit into our schedule that we know how much things we can actually expect our schedule to cover and learn to plan ahead better for the future. The last misconception is you can train your brain to multitask better. No. If this is your belief, then you are far down the drain and probably thinks more of yourself than is humanly possible. While you can train yourself to switch tasks more quickly, you can't improve your brain's ability to focus on multiple complex tasks simultaneously. The human brain has limitations on attention and focus, and while practice might help with efficiency in switching, it doesn't negate the cognitive cost of dividing attention. While trying to do a lot of things at once, you lose all sense of accomplishment. And each switch will make you from one subject to another takes a drain on your mental ability to focus, as we already established. A day of skipping through several different things impacts your focus a lot. And after every switch, it will take you longer and longer to get back into focus mode again. And that, my friends, that is a silent killer. You won't notice it at first, but after some time, you'll get the sense that you are getting nothing done. And even though you're trying to running around getting everything done. Trying to multitask can actually drop your IQ with an equivalent of a whole night's sleep. Then how effective are you? Multitasking makes us dumber. It's just that simple. And while talking about these common misconceptions, we should address a concept that some of you might not be familiar with you might not be familiar with the term, but you all know about this. And that is attention residue. We don't intentionally think about this, but it is happening in the background. And this is the concept of lingering thoughts from previous tasks that can affect the next one. And I don't think I have to tell you anymore how that affects your focus on the new tasks. Try to remember this one, attention residue. Maybe you need a break between tasks. Maybe you need to have a completely different room, but you need to leave those memories or thoughts about that task behind before you go on to the next one. So the consequences. Multitasking often leads to mistakes because the brain is not fully engaged in any one task. And constantly switching between tasks can lead to mental exhaustion, higher stress levels, and eventually burnout. In a team setting, multitasking can lead to miscommunications and misunderstandings, damaging professional relationships. And that is not even mentioning our personal relationships with family if we don't find a way to focus at where we're at that time. You are able to task switch somewhat efficiently for a short period of time, but if that goes on every week, every month, year after year, it won't work. And if you're doing everything at home and at work without focus and structure, some things will be left behind. It might be your mental capacity taking a hit, or things that you actually forget to do. If you recognize yourself according to this, you are like me and need a proper strategy to cope. Some people are better at organizing their workload than others. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We all have different skills. I need to organize my whole life a lot because I am that very impulsive person, and it leads me to lose focus very easily. I know this, and I have found ways to cope with it. It's okay for me to be impulsive when it doesn't affect other things or people. But now to the more positive things. When we have accepted that multitasking isn't a long-lasting solution, we need to find that way of dealing with the constant load of things to get done. And for every person, that is going to be different. But it could be a good start to recognize your triggers. So there are some different kind of triggers. There's probably more than this, but these are the most common ones. About digital notifications, that is emails, social media alerts, instant messaging, or whatever. Perhaps you check your emails as soon as the notification pops up. Or you have a lot of open tabs. Having multiple browser tabs open actually often leads us to frequent switching because the choices are there. So why not have a look at all of them? We have the physical environment, that is noises, interruptions from colleagues, or just basically a cluttered workspace. That can be really distracting. Or you have internal triggers. You are easily to get bored. Your anxiety about not getting everything done can actually spiral you into doing more things at once. Maybe you want to switch a task whenever a certain project becomes challenging. It can be a million different things inside all of these different topics. So before we can change our behavior, we need to know what causes it. And if we don't address the right issue, the problem will be back again soon. So we are going to do a bit of a self-assessment. This is for you to try to narrow it down, and I will give you a few minutes to read these through. So, which of these questions was the hardest for you to read and answer for yourself? Do you not have a good way of starting your day? It's a lack of planning and structure, maybe? Do you read the word notifications and kind of cringe? Or is it the last one that can be hard to pinpoint what it's caused by? This is the pattern that you need to address, because therein lies the behavior that you need to change. Just like a smoker might have the morning's first cigarette with their coffee, we need to identify what behavior this pattern occurs in. As I said, the solution will be different depending on where your problem is. Maybe set a few time slots every day when you do check your email, and in between, you might even close Outlook, because if you don't work with SLA or on call, I'm pretty sure that there is no email that can't wait a couple of hours. If the problem occurs when something starts becoming more challenging, then breaking down things into smaller pieces might be your way. And reward yourself with a break when a task is done. That makes it more likely that you have energy and inspiration for the next task. If it's just a big monster, we don't have the energy for it and we lose interest. So the one thing that all of these kind of solutions have in common is that they need time management. So even if it is to start your day with a clear agenda or divide your project into smaller tasks or disable notification, it all comes down to time management. And that is something that we have heard about for time and time again, and we all know about it. Not many of us actually do implement it and use it, but we need to manage our time and accept that a day only has 24 hours and we're supposed to work for less than half of that. This doesn't have to be a big life change. You could start really small and just change one thing. And that will inevitably lead to an actual difference in your everyday life. Bad habits takes time to break. So it might not be done in a day, it might not be done in a month, but keep struggling, keep finding ways for you, and be kind to yourself and accept that, but start that change. For example, if you need to build a data warehouse for a new project, you know that you need a lot of hours for that. Probably days or weeks or months rather than hours. So plan and schedule that time in. Maybe not all in one go. You probably wouldn't save a big chunk of money in one go rather than saving some every month. If you plan those hours throughout the week or months to come, you know what you are supposed to do and when. Planning projects like this makes it more transparent to ourselves than even if we estimated for 40 hours for a client. That doesn't translate into 40 hours like in a calendar week. Those 40 hours might be distributed over 4 weeks when we start to schedule them into our actual agenda and see how long those 40 hours will take. And if by the end of the time you're not done, then you know for next time what in your estimates went wrong. And you take that into account the next time around. That's just good practice of time management. We don't get it right the first time, but we have a conscious plan to try again, and it will be easier to recognize where we do go wrong. I do a weekly planning thing. At the beginning of my work week, I write down the 3 most urgent things that I need to get done. And I fit those into my agenda first, when I know I will have the highest success rate of actually achieving them. Dividing your planning according to subjects or topics to different days a week is something that I very much recommend. You could schedule in research time for maybe the start of the week, or maybe Friday is the perfect day for that. Book meetings only before lunch or after lunch. You know when you have the ability to be the most focused and productive and when it's the best time for meetings. That kind of careful planning is the base of time management. And it is okay to be inconvenient and tell people that the meeting time that they proposed doesn't work for you. The protection of our time is a sign to others that you have integrity and know what's best for you. And of course, you should tell people why you declined that meeting during that time. People will most of the time just show you understanding and adapt. It's okay to have needs and ask for things. As a Swede, believe me, that's a hard thing to grasp, but it can be done. Start with one thing and maybe add something when you get that first thing working. Like any sort of broken code, scale down and see what works and what doesn't. Can you change the code, or should you delete it altogether and start from scratch? Sometimes you may find yourself multitasking because you took on a task you don't really have time for. Again, don't be afraid to say no when asked to complete additional tasks. Be aware of how much is on your plate and how long it will take to complete. If you can't fit in any more in your day, simply decline. There's no need to provide a long explanation. Keep it short and simple. You can utilize the Eisenhower matrix to help prioritize your tasks based on urgency and importance. There are many different kinds of example of Eisenhower matrix and flavors thereof. Just Google it and try to find something that you find interesting and works for you. But this one categorizes tasks into 4 boxes: urgent and important, not urgent but important, urgent but not important, and neither urgent nor important. And by that, we know how to deal with it. For example, do you have a deadline for a certain thing coming up that's urgent and important? Do it now. Do you need to review an architecture, but there is no specific deadline for it? Decide on when to schedule it in. Do you need to book a meeting with a client or a stakeholder, but there's also including a couple of your colleagues? Delegate to one of them to reach out to client and find a good time that we can schedule it for. You don't always have to do it yourself. Do you have something in the back of your head that you would find it would be nice to get done, but is really not important or urgent? Delete it. In journalism, we learn the phrase kill your darlings. Something might feel really good and look really beautiful in text, but it's utterly useless. Kill your darlings. That will save you time. At least for now. It doesn't have to be that this thing will never be done. But if your plate is currently full, that is not on your list of prioritizations. But it can also be good for us to not only work on the super urgent tasks, but have one thing that is of less importance and breathe a bit. But regardless of how you prioritize your things, we then need a technique on how to find that focus and accomplish those things. So if your trigger is somewhere in the area of keeping focus, this is where you should listen. We already have a very intense job that requires of us to be on top of a lot of things at once. But we can't stay on top of all the new releases at the same time as doing our jobs. We have to make time for both working and keeping up with the releases in our calendar at separate times. Otherwise, if we chop up every day into 100 different focus areas, our mental health is being slaughtered. One of my closer friends explained to me a while back that every time that she gets distracted during the workday with interesting articles or things to read up on, she saves them and then goes back to them at a later stage, at a time that she has scheduled into her agenda for research time. It could be once a week, it could be every other week. That is brilliant. We don't need to keep ourselves updated with every release or interesting article out there at that precise moment. Setting time aside in our calendar for when we browse through all of those interesting things with intentional planning, that's a game changer. least when you're working in this area, when it's so constant and so fast. There are a few things we can keep in mind to get back in control. So the Pomodoro technique, for example, is to be more focused at one task at a hand and helps us to remind us to take breaks. Uh, this specific technique there's apps, there are gadgets, websites, everything. So it's basically an alarm clock, and it often starts with 25 minutes. After those 25 minutes, an alarm goes off, and you're supposed to take a break and get up, maybe get a coffee, maybe go for a walk, do something. And then the alarm goes off again after 5 minutes to remind you to get back to work. Doesn't have to be 25 minutes. Try yourself, try how long your attention span is, and work with it. But the important thing here is to remind us to take breaks, because no one is focused for 8 hours straight. Taking help to break up the time and having constant breaks can result in getting more things achieved, even if we work less of the time than we did before. There are a number of technical features that we can utilize and help ourselves gaining that control. Stay Focused is, I think it's an app or a website, I'm not sure at the moment, which limits the time that you can spend on distracting websites. And when that allotted time is up, you're blocked. We also have Rescue Time. It tracks your digital habits, and then it helps you see patterns in form of a detailed report. This might speak to anyone who's working with Power BI reports. To actually see that in your face often is a good wake-up call to how much time we spend on the wrong things. Then we have the music. There is brown, pink, white noise. The music we choose can vastly different impact on our focus. Noise music like these can help the brain to relax and focus. Podcasts won't do that. They require of you to listen and focus on that thing. I know that a lot of people like to listen to music with lyrics, but even lyrics can be stealing our focus. You might find yourself just humming the lyrics, and that's a pointer to you have lost focus. So be intentional with the music that you do listen to. And this cannot be reminded enough. We need consistent breaks. Even if you use Pomodoro or not, we need them. Go get that mailbox all across this town when you're supposed to post a letter, or get a coffee from the coffee shop down the street instead of the one in the office, or I don't know, just go up and walk. A few minutes outside can do wonders for our brains. I have a bit of a secret, and that is that I struggle the most after lunch to get back into focus. That's where I get into my slump and I kind of have hard time getting back to it again. So before lunch, I write a post-it and I smack it bang on my screen. On that post-it, I write the top 3 things that I should do after lunch. It kind of speeds up the time for me to get back, to know where I was, to know what's most important, to get back at it again. Because before lunch Linda is so much better than after lunch Linda. And it's stupid that I need a post-it, but it really do works. Just focusing my thoughts and knowing what's most important, getting that written down, and then going to lunch. It's a game changer for me. If your trigger from the self-assessment is distractions from notifications, then this part is for you. There is no easy way to say this, but shut down Outlook, Teams, Slack, Twitter. Keep a focus on what you're doing. This is also very hard for me. I have zero self-control most of the time. Therefore, I actually need to physically place my phone in another room and close down all of the distracting pages. Physically placing my phone in another room is a bitch when it comes to MFA, but it's worth it and it gets me up and do some more steps than I usually do. I even found that I concentrate better when I'm sitting beside someone else. Then I feel more obliged to not disturb that person. I think you all know what works for you. Pinpoint that and try to make changes where it could have the biggest effect. Do I feel like a child having to physically place the phone somewhere else? Yeah, but since I cannot control things otherwise, I am being the adult and doing just that. There are 100 different ways of establishing better time management. It all comes down to actually making a decision to take that first step and create a plan and follow through. To put it in words that we all know, if you could optimize a database or a Power BI report with a significant amount by making one little change, would you do it? Of course you would. Take care of your mental capacity as you do with your technical optimizations. By doing less, we in fact gain productivity. If your trigger is physical distraction, then this could actually be quite easily fixed. Always keep your desk or office area decluttered. Maybe end every day with removing all of that unnecessary stuff so that you have some mental peace and quiet the next day when you start off. Let your coworkers know that they shouldn't distract or talk to you, that when you're having your noise canceling phones on, they shouldn't bother you. Have the right light in the room. Many people don't think about this, and many people like to work in a dark environment. It's cozy. It doesn't work. We are not finding the right energy and focus in a dark room. That is not how the human brain is working. Whichever is your trigger, I do recommend you to try monotasking. Go to the bathroom without your phone. Take a walk without a podcast or a book in your ears. Just try it out and see how it feels. We don't have to have that feeling of always doing multiple things. That is not something that is required of us. We often talk about work-life balance, and that cannot be highlighted enough. But even if you have nailed down that work-life balance and separate them, it won't save you from a chaotic work schedule. It doesn't matter how much time off you have then. It's still an overwhelming chaos that will be hard for anyone to get things done during. We won't be able to get away from reality, which consistently consists of several different things that try to steal our attention. But by identifying our weaknesses, we can change that behavior. Having a structure makes the mess of life so much easier to manage. So with a conscious plan for your energy and focus, you will feel so much better and last so much longer. So take care of yourself and take responsibility for your own mental health well-being. I will do my best so that my family and colleagues don't have to pick up where I lack. Because it is my responsibility to manage my time as best as I can so they don't have to pay the price for it. Because it's almost always other people who recognize that we are struggling before we do. Take that responsibility on yourself. That's all I had. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you can take some of this and put it to work for you.
Yeah! Do you hear all the applause?
Was the food good?